I didn't know my son had used my name until the bank called me instead of him. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a wrong number, a system error, something simple, because that's what you tell yourself when something doesn't make sense. But the woman on the phone didn't sound confused. She sounded certain. "Mrs. Carter," she said, calm and professional, "we need to discuss your outstanding balance." Outstanding balance. Those two words didn't belong to me. "I think you have the wrong person," I replied. Still polite, still steady, because there was no reason not to be. "I don't have any debt with your bank." A pause. Short. Controlled. "No, ma'am," she said. "You do." That was the moment something shifted. Not panic. Not yet. Just awareness. The kind that makes you stop talking and start listening differently. "What account are you referring to?" I asked. Her keyboard clicked softly in the background. Then she read it out. Loan number. Amount. Date opened. And then, the name attached to it. Mine. Not similar. Not close. Exact. I didn't say anything for a second, because I was trying to understand something that didn't fit. I've always been careful. With money. With paperwork. With anything that required my name on it. Especially after John passed. He used to handle everything. Every document. Every decision. Every detail that felt too big to get wrong. And when he was gone, I made sure nothing slipped. Nothing got overlooked. So hearing my name tied to something I didn't recognize didn't just feel strange. It felt wrong. "There must be some kind of mistake," I said. But this time, my voice wasn't as certain. "I haven't signed anything recently." Another pause. Longer this time. Not confusion. Verification. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "this account was opened 3 months ago." 3 months. I ran through that timeline in my head. Where I had been. What I had done. Who I had seen. Nothing. No appointments. No meetings. No reason for me to sign anything like that. "And the signature?" I asked. Because that was the only thing that mattered. The only thing that could make this real. "It matches your name on file," she said. Matches. Not confirmed. Not verified. Just matches. That word stayed with me. Because I've learned something over the years. Things that match aren't always real. Sometimes. They're just close enough. "Can you tell me who initiated the loan?" I asked. This time, the pause was different. Not system delay. Hesitation. "I'm not authorized to release that over the phone," she said. "But I can confirm the account is active and overdue." Overdue. That word landed harder. Because it meant something else. Time had passed. Enough for them to act. Enough for them to assume I wouldn't notice. Enough for something to already be in motion. "How much?" I asked. I wasn't ready for the answer. But I needed it. She told me. And for a second, everything went quiet. Not in the room. In my head. Because the number didn't make sense. Not for something accidental. Not for something small. This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. A big one. Made without me. Using my name. "I need to come in," I said. My voice steadier now. More focused. "Of course," she replied. "I'll schedule you for this afternoon." We set the time. Confirmed the location. Ended the call. And just like that, everything changed. I sat there for a moment. Phone still in my hand. Trying to connect something that didn't fully exist yet. Alone. In my name. 3 months old. Already overdue. That doesn't happen by accident. Not at that scale. Not with that kind of timing. Which meant someone had done this. Deliberately. Carefully. And believed they could get away with it. I stood up slowly. Walked to the kitchen. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Because there was only one person who had been here. Long enough to know everything. My routines. My habits. My paperwork. My name. David. My son. I didn't want to think that. Didn't want to connect that. But something inside me already had. Because when something like this happens, it's rarely a stranger. It's someone who knows exactly what they're doing. And exactly what you won't question. I looked toward the hallway. His door was closed. Same as always. Nothing out of place. Nothing obvious. Which made it worse. Because it meant whatever this was. It had been hidden well. Too well. I walked. Back to the table. Sat down. Tried to slow everything down. Because rushing wouldn't help. Guessing wouldn't help. I needed facts. Proof. Clarity. But one thought kept pushing through everything else. Sharp. Unavoidable. If someone used my name to take that kind of debt, then they didn't just think I wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. And that's when I realized something else. Something they clearly didn't know. The bank that issued that loan wasn't just any bank. And the name they used wasn't just any name. I reached for my phone again, scrolled through my contacts, stopped on a number I hadn't needed in years. Because if what I was starting to understand was true, then this wasn't just a problem. It was a mistake. A very expensive one. And they had just made it. I didn't confront him. Not right away. That was the first thing I controlled. Because walking down that hallway, knocking on his door, asking a question I wasn't ready to hear the answer to, wouldn't give me the truth. It would give him time. Time to explain. Time to adjust. Time to hide whatever I hadn't seen yet. And right now, I needed him to believe I didn't know anything. I placed the phone down slowly. Same spot. Same angle. Like the call never happened. Like nothing had changed. Because from his perspective, nothing had. That mattered. More than anything else. A door opened down the hall. Footsteps. Familiar. David walked into the kitchen. Same as always. Casual. Unaware. Morning, he said, grabbing a glass from the cabinet. I looked up. Just for a second. Morning. My voice steady. Neutral. No hesitation. Because if there was even the smallest shift, he would feel it. People always do. Especially when they have something to hide. He poured water. Drank it. Didn't look at me right away. But I could see it. That slight awareness. That instinct people have. When something isn't quite right. You okay? He asked. Simple question. But not random. I nodded. Yes. Short. Clean. Nothing extra. Because the less I gave him, the more he would assume. An assumption was already working in his favor. I stood up. Walked past him. Not fast. Not slow. Just normal. Routine. Everything exactly the way it always had been. Because routine was now part of the strategy. The bank appointment was set for the afternoon, which gave me time. Not to think. To observe. Because whatever this was, it didn't start with that call. It started earlier. Quietly. In ways I hadn't noticed yet. And if I looked carefully, the signs would be there. They always are. I returned to the living room. Sat in my usual chair. Same view. Same light coming through the window. But this time, I wasn't just sitting. I was replaying. The past 3 months. Every detail. Every small moment. Everything that felt slightly off, but not enough to question. At the time. Now, everything mattered. The first thing that came back to me was the mail. Envelopes arriving more frequently. Different logos. Different formatting. Not bills I recognized. But I didn't open them. Because David said he was handling a few things. Just temporary, he told me. Nothing you need to worry about. And I believed him. Because he's my son. Because I trusted him. Because that's what you do. Until you don't. Then there were the questions. Subtle. Casual. But now, they didn't feel casual anymore. Have you updated anything recently? Do you still use the same accounts? Do you remember your login for the bank? At the time, they sounded like concern. Like help. Now, they sounded like preparation. I leaned forward slightly. Hands clasped together. Because something else started to connect. The timing. 3 months ago. That's when the loan was opened. That's when the questions started. That's when the mail changed. That's when things shifted. Just enough for me not to notice. But enough for something to happen. Footsteps again. David moved through the living room this time. Phone in his hand. Focused. Not on me. Not on anything around him. On something else. Something that held his attention longer than usual. I watched him without turning my head. Just enough to see. Not enough to be obvious. Because observation only works when the other person doesn't know they're being observed. He stopped near the window. Typed something quickly. Paused. Then checked the screen. Again. That small delay. That hesitation. That's what stood out. Because it wasn't random. It was expectation. Waiting for something. A response. A confirmation. Or maybe a result. Heading out later? He asked suddenly. Still looking at his phone. I didn't answer right away. Just long enough to make it feel natural. Maybe, I said. Why? He shrugged slightly. Just asking. But he wasn't just asking. That much was clear now. Because if he knew about the loan, if he knew it was tied to me, then he also knew something else. That at some point, I would find out. And if he was asking about my schedule now, then that meant something was coming. Something time-sensitive. Something he needed to manage. Before I saw it. I have an appointment this afternoon, I added. Not a lie. Not the full truth either. Just enough. He looked up this time. Quick. Then back down. What for? Simple question. But the tone had changed. Slightly tighter. Less casual. I held his gaze. Just for a second. Just something I need to take care of. That was it. No detail. No explanation. Because now, I wasn't the one giving information. I was the one watching what happened when I didn't. He nodded. Too quickly. Okay. And walked past me. Back down the hallway. Door closed. Same as always. But nothing about it felt the same anymore. Because now I understood something clearly. This wasn't just about a loan. It wasn't just about my name. It was about control, timing, access, and the belief that I would never question any of it. I sat there a moment longer, letting everything settle into place. Because the next step wasn't guessing, wasn't confronting. It was confirmation. And by the time I walked into that bank later, I wasn't going to ask what happened. I was going to find out exactly how far he thought he could go. I didn't wait. When the time came, I left the house exactly the way I always did. Same pace, same routine, keys by the door, bag over my shoulder. No hesitation. Because if there was one thing I understood now, it was that routine had been used against me. And today, I was going to use it back. The bank wasn't far. 10 minutes at most. A drive I had made countless times before, but this time felt different. Not unfamiliar, just sharper. Every detail stood out more. The road, the turns, the way my hands rested on the steering wheel. Because I wasn't going there as a customer. Not really. I was going there to confirm something I already suspected. Something I didn't fully understand yet, but something I knew was real. The building came into view. Glass front, clean lines, quiet, professional. Nothing about it suggested anything was wrong, which made sense. Because things like this don't look wrong from the outside. They look normal until you step inside. I parked, turned off the engine, sat there for a second. Just one. Because once I walked through those doors, this would stop being a question and become an answer. I stepped out, closed the door behind me, and walked in. Good afternoon. The same voice from the phone. Calm, recognizable. She stood behind the desk, already expecting me, which meant this wasn't unusual. Not for her, not for the system, only for me. Mrs. Carter? She asked. I nodded. That's right. She gestured toward a private office. This way. The room was quiet. Neutral colors. No distractions. A place designed for clarity, for decisions, for things that couldn't be undone. She closed the door behind us, sat across from me, placed a folder on the table. My name was on it. Clear, centered, official. That alone told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a mistake. It was a file, a record, something that had been processed. Before we begin, she said, I need to verify your identity. Of course she did. That part was normal, routine, expected. I handed her my ID, watched as she checked it, compared it, confirmed it, then nodded. Thank you. A pause. Then she opened the folder, and everything changed. The first page was the loan agreement. Printed, structured, complete, not partial, not draft, final. My eyes moved across the page. Name, address, account details, all correct. Every single one, except for one thing. I never agreed to it. Can you walk me through this? I asked, my voice steady, because I wasn't reacting yet. I was gathering. She nodded. This account was opened 3 months ago, she said. Same timeline. Same point everything started shifting at home. It was approved under your profile, she continued, using verified identification and signature. Verified. That word again. Not assumed. Not matched. Verified. That meant something had been checked. Accepted. Confirmed. Who verified it? I asked. She paused. Not because she didn't know. Because she had to decide how much she could say. It was processed through our internal system, she said, along with submitted documentation. Documentation. Plural. More than one piece. That mattered. Can I see those? I asked. Another pause. Then she turned the page. Copies. Not originals. But clear. Readable. Detailed. My ID. My information. My name. Everywhere. Attached. Connected. Used. And then, the signature. I stared at it. Longer this time. Because this wasn't a copy in a drawer. This was part of a system. Something that had already been accepted. Already moved forward. Already tied to me. It looks like mine, I said. Because it did. At a glance. But I knew better now. Would you like us to verify it? She asked. That question mattered. Because it meant something else. They hadn't done that yet. Not fully. Not deeply. They had accepted it. But they hadn't questioned it. Not yet, I said. Because I needed something first. Context. Connection. Clarity. Who submitted this? I asked. She checked the file. Scrolled slightly on her screen. Then stopped. There's a co-signer listed, she said. My focus sharpened immediately, because that was the missing piece. The part that connected everything. The name? I asked. She looked up, just for a second, then back down, and read it. David Carter. The room didn't change. The light didn't shift. Nothing moved. But something inside me did. Not shock. Not confusion. Confirmation. Because now, there was no question left. He didn't just know about it. He was part of it. Directly. Clearly. Officially. He's your son, she asked. I nodded. Slow. Controlled. Yes. A pause. Then she added, he initiated the process. And just like that, everything I suspected became real. Not in pieces. Not in patterns. All at once. Because this wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just access. It was intention. And the person behind it was someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Or thought he did. I didn't react immediately. Not when she said his name. Not when everything I suspected finally had something to attach to. Because reacting wouldn't help. Not here. Not in this room. Not in front of someone who was only seeing the situation as a file. A process. A record. I needed details. Not emotion. So he initiated it, I said. My voice steady. Clear. No hesitation. She nodded. Yes. A pause. He provided the initial documentation and requested cosign authorization. Cosign. That word mattered. Because it meant something specific. It meant he couldn't do it alone. He needed my name. My identity. My credibility. Attached to it. To make it work. Did I authorize anything? I asked. She looked at the file again. Checked something more carefully this time. There is a recorded authorization, she said. Recorded. That word landed differently. Because it meant there was proof. Something beyond paper. Beyond signature. Something that made this stronger. Harder to challenge. What kind of authorization? I asked. She hesitated. Not long. But enough. Verbal confirmation, she said. The room went quiet. Not physically, but inside me. Because that changed everything. Can I hear it? I asked. My voice didn't change. Didn't rise. Didn't push. Just asked. She nodded. I can pull it up. She turned to her computer. Typed something in. Opened another window. Clicked. Waited. Then audio. A recording. Clear. Direct. Unmistakable. Mrs. Carter, do you confirm your authorization for this loan? A pause. And then my voice. Or something that sounded like it. Yes. Simple. Clean. Confident. Like it belonged there. But it didn't. Not completely. Not in the way it should have. Because I knew something instantly. That wasn't how I speak. Not in situations like that. Not when something matters. The tone was right. The rhythm was right. But the intention wasn't. I leaned back slightly. Not shocked. Not confused. Just certain. That's not me, I said. She didn't argue. Didn't question it. Because that wasn't her role. Would you like us to flag it for review? She asked. That word again. Review. Process. System. Everything built on structure. Everything built on proof. Yes, I said. But not just the voice. She paused. Then nodded. Understood. Because now, this wasn't just about one piece. It was about everything connected to it. The signature. The audio. The submission. All of it. Built together. To create something that looked real. Felt real. Moved like it was real. But wasn't. I looked back at the file. At my name. Repeated. Used. Attached to something I never agreed to. Who verified the identity? I asked. She checked again. Digital verification system, she said. Based on submitted ID and matching voice confirmation. Matching. That word again. Because that's what they built this on. Not truth. Similarity. Close enough. Convincing enough. Enough to pass. Enough to move forward. Enough to assume no one would question it. I exhaled slowly. Because now I understood something else. This wasn't random. This wasn't careless. This was planned. Step by step. Access to my documents. Access to my information. Enough understanding of the system to move through it without raising alarms. And the only person who had all of that was David. Is the account active? I asked. Yes, she replied. And currently overdue. That word again. Overdue. Because time had passed. Enough for them to expect something. Payments. Action. Continuation. But that hadn't happened. Because I didn't know. Because I wasn't part of it. And now, everything was catching up. What happens next? I asked. She folded her hands slightly. Professional. Calm. Once we flag the account for investigation, she said, the process pauses. A pause. No further action can be taken until verification is complete. Good. That was what I needed. Time. Not for them. For me. To stop anything else from happening, I said. Yes. Immediate. Clear. And the responsibility? She hesitated again. Because this part mattered more. If the authorization is proven invalid, she said, the liability shifts. Shifts. That word carried weight. Because it meant this wouldn't stay attached to me. Not if it wasn't real. Not if it couldn't be proven. And if it is proven invalid? I asked. It becomes a fraud investigation. There it was. The line. The point where everything changes. Because this wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't just misuse. This had a name. A category. Consequences attached to it. I nodded slowly. Because that was enough. Enough to move forward. Enough to stop guessing. Enough to understand exactly where this was going. I stood up. Not rushed. Not uncertain. Because now, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was acting. Thank you, I said. She nodded. We'll begin the review immediately. I turned toward the door. Hand on the handle. But before I opened it, one thought settled clearly. Sharp. Unavoidable. He didn't just use my name. He built something around it. Something he believed would hold. Something he believed I wouldn't question. But now, that structure was already breaking. And the only thing left to see was how far it would fall. I didn't go home right away. Not after that. Not after hearing my own voice, or something close enough to it. Agree to something I never said. Because going back too soon would turn this into a conversation. And I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. I needed one more thing. Control. I walked out of the bank slowly. Same pace. Same posture. Nothing rushed. Nothing emotional. Because the moment I let that show, I lose the advantage. And right now, the only thing working in my favor was that he didn't know I knew. I got into the car, closed the door, sat there for a second, hands on the wheel, eyes forward, letting everything settle into place. Because this wasn't confusion anymore. This was structure. A system he used. A process he followed. Documents. Voice. Verification. All of it lined up. To make something false look real. And that meant something else. He didn't just act impulsively. He planned this. I reached for my phone. Scrolled through my contacts. Stopped on a name I hadn't needed in years. Mr. Lawson. Not a lawyer. Not exactly. He was something else. Something most people wouldn't think to call. But I knew better. Because years ago, when John was still alive, he made sure I understood one thing. If anything ever touches your name, he said, don't just react. Track it. At the time, I didn't think I'd ever need that advice. Now, it was the only thing that mattered. I pressed call. 1 ring. 2. Then, Lawson. Same voice. Sharp. Direct. No wasted time. It's Linda Carter, I said. A pause. Recognition. Linda, he replied. What do you need? No small talk. No questions. Just straight to it. Because that's how he worked. I think my identity's been used, I said. Loan. My name. Not mine. Silence. Not confusion. Processing. How recent, he asked. 3 months. Another pause. Active. Yes. Overdue. That word again. But this time, it felt different. Because now it wasn't just information. It was leverage. Do they know you've seen it? He asked. No, good. Immediate. No hesitation. Keep it that way. That mattered. Because it confirmed something I already understood. This wasn't just about proving what happened. It was about timing. Position. Control. Same things he used. Same things I was about to take back. I need everything traced, I said. Submission. Access. Voice recording. All of it. Send me what you have, he replied. I'll pull the rest. Simple. Clean. Effective. No explanation needed. Because he already understood. The moment identity is used like this, it leaves a trail. And trails don't disappear. Not if you know where to look. I ended the call. Sat there a moment longer. Because now, something had changed. Not the situation. My position in it. Because I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't reacting. I was tracking. And once you start tracking something like this, it doesn't stay hidden for long. I started the car. Drove. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. Because the next step wasn't confrontation. It was confirmation. I needed to see what he did next. Not what he said. Not what he claimed. What he did. Because action reveals everything. Especially when someone thinks they're still in control. When I got back to the house, nothing looked different. Door closed. Lights on. Quiet. The same way it had always been. Which made sense. Because whatever was happening underneath all of this, not on the surface. I walked inside. Same routine, same movement. Set my keys down. Placed my bag on the table. Everything exactly the way it always had been. Because routine still mattered. Now more than ever. David was in the living room. Phone in his hand. Scrolling. Relaxed. Or at least, trying to look like it. He glanced up. "Everything okay?" he asked. Same question as before. Same tone. But now I could hear it. The layer underneath. Checking. Not caring. I nodded. Yes. And kept walking. No pause. No explanation. Because the less I gave him, the more he stayed in his version of control. And I needed that. I moved into the kitchen. Poured a glass of water. Didn't drink it. Just held it. Because I was listening. Not to words. To silence. To movement. To patterns. Because once someone starts something like this, they don't stop. They adjust. They react. They continue. And if I watched carefully enough, I would see it. His phone buzzed. Once. Short. Sharp. He looked down immediately. Too fast. Too focused. Not casual. Not random. That was it. That was the moment. Because whatever that message was, it mattered. He read it. Paused. Then typed something quickly. Then stopped. Looked up. Toward the hallway. Toward me. Then back down. That hesitation. That shift. That's where control breaks first. Not in action. In reaction. I didn't move. Didn't look at him. Didn't give him anything. Because now, I wasn't trying to understand what he had done. I already knew that. I was watching what he would do next. Because whatever this was, whatever he thought he had built, it wasn't finished. And the moment he realized that would be the moment everything started to fall apart. The moment I heard that recording, I knew it wasn't just a signature problem that I didn't ask him about the message. Not when his phone buzzed. Not when he looked up too quickly. Not when I could see that small shift in his expression. Because asking would give him something to hold on to. A reason. An explanation. A way to control the moment again. And right now, control needed to stay exactly where it was. With me. I set the glass down. Walked out of the kitchen. Same pace. Same routine. Nothing changed on the surface. Because that's what he expected. That I would move through the day the same way I always had. Unaware. Unquestioning. Predictable. And that expectation was still working in my favor. I went to my room. Closed the door. Not locked. Just closed. Because I didn't need to shut him out. I needed space. Space to think. Space to connect what I had with what I was about to get. My phone buzzed. Once. Not loud. But enough. Lawson. That was fast. I answered immediately. Yes. No greeting. No delay. Check your email, he said. Same tone. Direct. Efficient. Then the line went dead. I moved to the desk. Opened my laptop. Logged in. Inbox already updated. One new message. No subject line. Just a file attached. I opened it. And everything started to line up. Timestamps. IP logs. Access records. Structured. Clean. Clear. The kind of information most people never see. But once you do, you can't unsee it. I scanned the first section. Login attempts. Successful access. Dates. Times. 3 months back. Same starting point. Same moment everything shifted. Then, the location. Not random. Not distant. Not hidden. This house. The same network. The same connection. Used repeatedly. Consistently. Deliberately. I didn't need to guess anymore. I didn't need to wonder. This wasn't something done from outside. This was done from inside. I scrolled further. Device ID. Matched. Repeated. Same device used to access my information. My accounts. My details. Everything tied together. And then, another section. Voice submission metadata. Time of recording. Upload point. Processing node. All technical. All precise. But one thing stood out. The recording wasn't made in a controlled environment. Not at the bank. Not through a secure call. It was uploaded. From a device. The same device. I leaned back slightly. Because that changed something. Not what happened. How it happened. This wasn't just impersonation. It was construction. Piece by piece. Using what he had access to. Using what he knew. And building something that looked complete. Looked real. Looked convincing enough. To pass. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message. Lawson. Voice is synthetic. Pattern-based. Not live. Confirmation. I read it twice. Not because I didn't understand. Because I did. Immediately. Synthetic. That meant he didn't just speak for me. He recreated me, used my voice, my tone, my patterns, enough to fool a system, enough to pass a check, enough to move forward. I closed my eyes for a second, not out of shock, out of clarity, because now there was no misunderstanding left, no doubt, no gray area. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't careless. This was planned, detailed, executed. I typed back, "Can you confirm source?" A few seconds. Then, same device, same network, same user pattern. That was it. That was everything. Because now, it wasn't just connected. It was locked. Every piece, every step, every action pointed to one place, one person, David. I stood up slowly, walked to the door, opened it. The house was quiet, too quiet, because now I knew what was sitting underneath it. Not just tension, truth, the kind that changes everything. I stepped into the hallway, didn't rush, didn't hesitate, because confrontation wasn't the next step. Not yet. Timing still mattered. Position still mattered. And more importantly, he still thought he was ahead, that nothing had changed, that everything was still under control. That belief was the last thing holding this together. And once that broke, everything else would follow. I moved back into the living room. Same place he had been before. Same posture. Same phone in his hand. But something was different now. Subtle, but visible. He looked up faster this time. Like he was expecting something. Like he felt something shifting. Even if he didn't know what it was yet. "You okay?" he asked again. Same words. Different tone. Less casual. More alert. I nodded. Yes. And sat down. Across from him. Not close. Not far. Just enough. Because now, this wasn't about distance. It was about control. And I had something he didn't. The truth. Not suspected. Not guessed. Proven. He went back to his phone. But not the same way. Slower. More aware. Because somewhere, something had changed. Not in what he knew. In what he felt. That instinct people get. When control starts slipping. When something doesn't line up anymore. When something they built begins to break. I didn't look at him. Didn't say anything. Because the next move wasn't mine. It was his. And whatever he did next would tell me everything I needed to know. Not about what he had done. I already knew that. About what he thought he could still get away with. And how much further he was willing to go. Before it all collapsed. I didn't say anything. Not after sitting down. Not after seeing that small shift in his eyes. Because silence, done right, does something words never can. It makes people fill the space themselves. And when someone is already hiding something, they don't fill it calmly. They fill it carefully. David didn't look at me again right away. He stayed focused on his phone. Or at least, pretended to. Because I could see it. That slight delay in his movements. That extra second before each tap. That pause before each response. He wasn't just scrolling anymore. He was thinking, adjusting, trying to stay one step ahead of something he couldn't fully see yet. His phone buzzed again. Longer this time. Not a notification. A call. He glanced at the screen. Quick. Then stood up. Too fast. "I'm going to take this," he said. Already moving. Already turning toward the hallway. I didn't respond. Just watched him walk away. Because that was the first real change. Not in what he did. In how he did it. He didn't stay in the room. Didn't take the call casually. He left. Which meant it mattered. The door to his room closed. Soft. Controlled. But not quiet enough to hide it. I stayed where I was. Didn't follow. Didn't move closer. Because I didn't need to hear the words. I only needed to understand the pattern. And the pattern was already clear. 3 minutes. Maybe 4. That's how long the call lasted. Long enough to matter. Short enough to stay controlled. He came back out. Same posture. Same pace. But something underneath it had shifted. Not visible to most people. But visible to me. Because now I knew where to look. "All good?" I asked. First time I spoke since sitting down. Same tone as before. Neutral. Unconcerned. Like the question meant nothing. He nodded. "Yeah. Just work stuff." Work. That word. Again. Convenient. Vague. Useful. Because it explains everything. Without saying anything. I nodded back. Of course. And let it go. Because pushing now would close him off. And I didn't want that. Not yet. He sat down again. But not in the same place. Closer to the edge of the couch. More alert. Less relaxed. That mattered. Because comfort disappears first. When control starts slipping. I stood up. Walked toward the kitchen. Not because I needed anything. Because movement changes pressure. It shifts attention. Creates space. And in that space, People reveal more than they intend to. I reached the counter, picked up the same glass from earlier. Still full, still untouched. Because I hadn't needed water. I needed time. Behind me, movement. Subtle, but immediate. He stood up again, not following me, just adjusting, repositioning, trying to stay connected to the room, trying not to lose control of it. That's when I knew. He felt it. Not what I knew, but that something had changed. And when someone feels that shift, they act. Are you going out later? He asked. Same question as before, but not the same intention. This time, it wasn't casual. It was checking, timing, position. I turned slightly, looked at him. Just enough. Why? I asked. Simple, direct. He hesitated. Barely, but it was there. No reason, he said. Too quickly. I just thought, maybe I'd head out too. There it was. Adjustment, not reaction. Planning. He was aligning his movement with mine, trying to stay ahead of something, trying to control timing. Because timing was how this started. And timing was how he thought he could still manage it. I might step out later, I said. Not a lie, not specific either. Just enough to keep him guessing. He nodded. Okay. But his eyes didn't settle. Not fully. Because uncertainty had already entered the room. And once it does, it doesn't leave easily. His phone buzzed again. Short. Sharp. He checked it immediately. Didn't hide it this time. Didn't leave the room. But his reaction was different. Faster. More focused. Because whatever was happening was escalating. I didn't ask. Didn't look. Didn't react. Because now, I didn't need information from him. I needed to see how far he would go, without knowing I was already ahead. He typed, paused, typed again, then stopped, looked up, at me, not casually, directly, for the first time since this started, like he was trying to read something, find something, confirm something. I held his gaze, not long, just enough, then looked away, because giving him nothing was the strongest position I had. He stood up again, walked toward the hallway, slower this time, more controlled, but not relaxed. And as he disappeared into his room again, one thought settled clearly. He wasn't fixing the problem. He was trying to manage it. Keep it contained. Keep it moving. Keep it from breaking. But what he didn't understand was that it had already broken. Not out here. Not in what he could see. Underneath. In the system. In the records. In the truth he thought he had built something on. And the more he tried to adjust, the more he revealed. Not what he had done. I already knew that. But how desperate he was to make it whole. I didn't follow him. Not when he went back to his room. Not when the door closed again. Because at this point, I wasn't trying to catch him. I was letting him show me everything. And people always do when they think they're still in control. I stayed in the kitchen. Same position. Same stillness. Because pressure doesn't come from movement. It comes from presence. From the feeling that something has changed, even if nothing has been said. And right now, that feeling was already there. His door opened again. Faster this time. Not cautious. Not measured. Reactive. He walked out with his phone still in his hand. Didn't sit down. Didn't return to where he was before. He stayed standing. That mattered. Because standing means you're not settled. Not comfortable. Not in control. You heading out? He asked. Same question. Third time. But now, there was no attempt to hide it. This wasn't casual anymore. This was need. I turned slightly. Looked at him. Soon, I said. No detail. No time. Just enough. He nodded. But his eyes didn't leave me. Not immediately. Like he was trying to measure something. Timing. Distance. Opportunity. And in that moment, I understood exactly what he was doing. He wasn't trying to fix anything. He was trying to stay ahead of it. I might run a few things first, he added. Too quickly. Too casually. Like he was filling space. Not informing me. I nodded once. Of course. And turned back to the counter. Because giving him permission kept him moving. Kept him thinking he still had space. And space is what reveals everything. He moved toward the door. Not rushing. But not relaxed either. Grabbed his keys. Checked his phone again. Then stopped. Just for a second. That hesitation again. The kind that doesn't come from thinking, but from doubt. Because somewhere, something wasn't lining up the way he expected. You sure you're okay? He asked. Again. Same words. Different tone. This time, there was something underneath it. Concern? No. Not really. It was closer to checking. Verifying. Trying to confirm whether I knew something. I turned. Looked at him directly this time. Long enough for it to matter. I'm fine, I said. And held the moment just 1 second longer. Because that's all it takes. 1 second of silence to make someone question everything. He nodded, but slower this time, less certain, then opened the door, stepped outside, and left. The house went quiet again, but not the same quiet as before. This one had weight, because now, everything was in motion. Not just what he had started, what I had set in place. I moved back into the living room, sat down, same chair, same position, but this time, I wasn't watching him. I was watching time, because timing was the only thing left that mattered. My phone buzzed. Lawson. I answered immediately. He's moving, I said. I know, he replied. No surprise. No question. Which meant he was already tracking it. Location just changed, he added. Heading toward the bank. Of course he was. That confirmed it. Because if something had shifted in the system, if something had been flagged, he would know. Not directly, but enough. Enough to feel it. Enough to react. He's trying to get there first, I said. Yes. Simple. Immediate. And he won't be able to fix it, Lawson added. That part mattered. Because it meant, whatever he thought he could still control, was already out of his reach. Let him try, I said. Because now, this wasn't about stopping him. It was about letting him move. Letting him act. Letting him confirm everything himself. I ended the call, set the phone down, and waited. Not long. Not impatiently. Just certain. Because once someone starts reacting, they don't stop. They escalate. 20 minutes. That's all it took. My phone buzzed again. Same number as before. The bank. I answered. Mrs. Carter. The woman said, your co-signer is here. There it was. The moment. The confirmation. He's asking about the account, she continued. Of course he was. He wants to review the status. I nodded slightly, even though she couldn't see me. I'll be there, I said, and ended the call. I stood up. Slow. Steady. No hesitation. Because now, there was nothing left to figure out. Nothing left to guess. Everything had aligned. Every move he made had led him exactly where I needed him to be. Not at home. Not behind a door. Not hidden behind a screen. But out in the open. In the one place where everything could be seen clearly. I grabbed my keys. Walked to the door. Opened it. The air outside felt different. Sharper. More defined. Because this wasn't just another step. This was the point where everything comes together. As I stepped outside, one thought settled in completely. He thought he was fixing the problem. But what he was really doing was walking straight into it. And this time, there was no way out. I didn't rush. Not even now. Because walking in too fast would turn this into a reaction. And I wasn't reacting anymore. I was closing something. The bank looked the same as it had earlier. Same glass doors. Same quiet. Same controlled environment. Nothing about it suggested anything had changed. But inside, everything had. Because now there were two sides of the same situation, moving toward the same place. One thinking it could fix it. The other already knowing it couldn't. I walked in. Same steps. Same pace. The woman at the desk looked up immediately. Recognition. Prepared. He's in the office, she said. No need for names. No need for explanation. We both knew exactly who she meant. The door was closed. That mattered. Because if it was closed, then something inside wasn't simple. Wasn't routine. Wasn't under control. I stepped forward. Hand on the handle. Paused. Not out of hesitation. Out of timing. Because once I opened that door, everything would shift. Not slowly. All at once. I turned the handle. Opened it. And stepped inside. David stood near the desk. Not sitting. Not relaxed. Tense. Focused. Talking, but not in the way he usually did. He stopped immediately when he saw me. That was the first real break. Not in what he said. In what he couldn't say anymore. Mom, he started. But the word didn't carry anything. No confidence. No control. Just delay. I didn't respond. Didn't acknowledge it. Because this wasn't about conversation. This was about position. And right now, he had already lost it. The woman from earlier sat behind the desk. Same posture. Same calm expression. But her focus had shifted. From him, to me. Because now, she knew who this actually involved. Mrs. Carter, she said. Professional. Measured. We were just reviewing the account. Reviewing. That word again. But now, it meant something different. Because this wasn't routine review. This was exposure. I stepped further into the room. Closed the door behind me. Quietly. Because I didn't need sound. The silence was already enough. He said there might be a mistake, she continued. Her eyes moved slightly toward him. Then back to me. Mistake. That word didn't land the same anymore. Not after everything I had seen. Not after everything I had confirmed. I looked at him. Directly. For the first time since this started. And what I saw wasn't confidence. Wasn't control. It was calculation. Still trying. Still searching for something that worked. But not finding it. There is a mistake, I said. My voice calm. Even. No pressure. Because truth doesn't need force. It holds on its own. David stepped forward slightly. Mom, I can explain. No, I said. Not louder. Not sharper. Just final. Because explanation comes after acknowledgement. And he wasn't there yet. I turned to the woman behind the desk. The account has been flagged for investigation, I said. Clear. Structured. Using the same language they understood. She nodded. Yes, it has. That confirmation mattered. Because now, it wasn't just between us. It was part of the system. Something that couldn't be undone by words. The signature is not valid, I continued. And the voice authorization is synthetic. I didn't rush the words. Didn't stack them. Placed them one at a time. Because each one carried weight. Each one removed something he thought he still had. David didn't speak. Didn't interrupt. Because now, there was nothing left to interrupt. She turned slightly toward him. Measured. Professional. Is there anything you'd like to clarify? She asked. That question wasn't neutral. It was procedural. A step. One he couldn't avoid. He hesitated. Longer this time. Because now, there was no version of this that worked. No explanation that fixed it. No angle that restored control. I just needed time, he said. The words came out uneven. Not planned. Not structured. Just exposed. Time. That's what this had always been about. Timing. Position. Movement. And now, he had run out of it. For what? I asked. Not aggressive. Not emotional. Just direct. Because the question mattered more than the answer. He looked at me. Then away. Then back again. I was going to fix it, he said. That was the second break. Because fixing something means you know it's wrong. And once you say that out loud, there's no going back. The room stayed quiet. Not empty. Not neutral. Heavy. Because everything had shifted. Not gradually. Not over time. Right here. In this moment. I nodded once. Not agreeing. Not accepting. Just acknowledging. Because this wasn't about what he intended. It was about what he did. And what that created. I turned back to the woman behind the desk. We proceed with the investigation, I said. Simple. Clear. No hesitation. She nodded. Understood. And just like that, control didn't shift. It settled. Into the place it should have been from the start. Not with assumption. Not with access. But with truth. I looked at him one more time. Not with anger. Not with disappointment. Just clarity. Because that was all that was left. And for the first time since this started, he understood something he hadn't before. He wasn't ahead anymore. He wasn't in control. He wasn't fixing anything. He was standing in the middle of something that had already been decided. And there was nothing left he could do to change it. No one spoke for a moment. Not after he said he was going to fix it. Not after the word fix made everything clearer than any explanation could. Because once something is named, it can't be hidden again. David didn't move. Not forward. Not back. He stayed where he was. Like stepping in any direction would make it worse. His eyes moved between me and the woman behind the desk. Looking for something. An opening. A way out. But there wasn't one. Not anymore. You don't understand, he said finally. The words came slower now. Careful. Like he was trying to rebuild something that had already fallen apart. I wasn't trying to, he stopped. Because he didn't have a version of that sentence that worked. Not one that changed anything. Not one that made this acceptable. I didn't interrupt. Didn't correct him. Because sometimes, silence forces the truth out more effectively than anything else. I just needed time, he said again. Softer this time. Less certain. I was going to pay it back before it became a problem. That part mattered. Not because it justified anything. Because it revealed something. He thought the risk was timing. That as long as he stayed ahead of it, nothing would break. Nothing would be questioned. Nothing would come back to him. That's not how this works, I said. My voice even. Not sharp. Not emotional. Just clear. Because now, this wasn't about reaction. It was about reality. He shook his head slightly. Like he didn't want to accept that. Like there was still something he hadn't considered. Something he thought would change everything. I used your name because it was easier, he said. There it was. The third break. Because now, it wasn't about mistake. Or misunderstanding. It was choice. Simple. Direct. Calculated. The woman behind the desk remained still. professional, but listening. Because this wasn't just a personal moment anymore. It was part of the process, part of the record. You accessed my information, I said. Not a question, a statement. He didn't deny it, didn't argue, because he couldn't. I had to, he replied. The words landed flat. Because had to doesn't hold up when there's a choice. For what? I asked. Same question as before. But now, the answer mattered more. He hesitated, then said it. The loan wouldn't go through without a co-signer. There it was. The structure, the reason, the system he worked around. And you chose me, I said. Not accusing, not emotional, just clear. Because the choice mattered more than the situation. He nodded. Barely, but enough. Because now, everything was out. Not hidden, not implied. Said. The woman behind the desk shifted slightly. Just enough to re-enter the conversation. Mr. Carter, she said. Given what has been presented, a pause. Measured. Careful. This account will remain under investigation. That word again. Investigation. But now, it wasn't distant. It wasn't procedural. It was immediate. Active. Already happening. And the liability? I asked. Because that was the part that mattered most. Not just what happened. What it meant. She looked at the file. Then back at me. If the authorization is determined to be invalid, she said, responsibility transfers to the initiating party. Initiating party. That was him. Not assumed. Not implied. Defined. David looked at her. Then at me. Then back again. Because now, the situation had changed in a way he didn't expect. Not just exposed. Reassigned. Shifted. That doesn't make sense, he said. But it did. Perfectly. He just hadn't considered it. Because in his version, nothing reached this point. Nothing got questioned. Nothing got reversed. It does, I said. Quiet. Clear. Because this was the part he didn't understand. Not about the loan. About the system. About the structure he thought he could move through without consequence. You thought you could stay ahead of it, I continued. Not pushing. Not accusing. Just stating what was already visible. That if you managed the timing, a pause, it would never catch up. He didn't respond. Because he knew it was true. Not in theory. In reality. The room stayed still. Because there was nothing left to argue. Nothing left to adjust. Everything had already shifted. I took a step back. Not away. Just enough to reset the space. Because this wasn't about holding ground anymore. It was about ending something. You used my name, I said. One last time. Not to repeat it. To finalize it. And now you understand what that means. He looked at me. Really looked. For the first time since this started. And in that moment, something changed. Not the situation. His understanding of it. Because now, he wasn't trying to fix anything. He wasn't trying to stay ahead. He wasn't trying to control anything. He was realizing something. Simple. Unavoidable. Final. He hadn't just taken a risk. He had taken it in the one place he never should have. And now, there was nothing left to stop it from catching up. No one argued after that. Not him. Not me. Because once responsibility was stated, there was nothing left to debate. Only what happened next. The woman behind the desk turned slightly, pulled the file closer. Her tone didn't change. Still professional. Still measured. But now, it carried direction. Given the information provided, she said, we're proceeding with a full review of the account. Full review. Not partial. Not delayed. Immediate. That mattered. Because once something enters that stage, it doesn't go backward. She continued. The authorization will be formally verified. A pause. And the account will be temporarily restricted. Restricted. That word landed differently. Because it meant movement had stopped. No adjustments. No changes. No control. David shifted slightly. Not stepping back. Not stepping forward. Just reacting. Because now, things were happening without him. And that's where control disappears completely. What does that mean for the balance? He asked. His voice quieter now. Less certain. No longer trying to lead. Trying to understand. It means no further transactions can be made, she replied. And the liability is under review. There it was again. Liability. Not abstract. Not distant. Attached. Waiting. And if it's confirmed? He asked. That question mattered. Because he already knew the answer. He just needed to hear it. If the authorization is determined to be invalid, she said, the account will be reassigned to the initiating party. Reassigned. Clean. Direct. Final. No confusion. No interpretation. David looked down. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just slowly. Because this wasn't something he could step away from. Not anymore. I didn't speak. Didn't add anything. Because everything that needed to be said had already been said. And now, the system was doing the rest. She closed the file. Not fully. Just enough. Because it wasn't finished. Not yet. This will take some time to process, she added. Time. That word again. But this time, it didn't belong to him. It belonged to the process. To the system. To something he couldn't control. I nodded once. Because I understood. This part doesn't happen instantly. It moves. Step by step. Document by document. Verification by verification. But once it starts, it doesn't stop. Is there anything else you need from me? I asked. Simple. Clear. No hesitation. She shook her head. We'll contact you if anything further is required. That was enough. Because now, everything had shifted out of this room. Into something larger. More structured. More permanent. David didn't move. Didn't speak. Because whatever he needed to say wouldn't change anything. Not here. Not now. I turned toward the door. Not rushed. Not slow. Just steady. Because leaving wasn't about ending something. It was about letting it continue. Without interference. As I reached for the handle, he spoke. Mom. The word came softer this time. Not delayed. Not controlled. Just real. I paused. Not turning yet. Because this moment mattered. More than anything else. I was going to fix it, he said again. But this time, it didn't sound like a plan. It sounded like something he had already lost. I turned. Looked at him. Fully. Not briefly. Not cautiously. Clearly. Because now, there was nothing left to hide. Nothing left to assume. Only what was true. You don't fix something like this after, I said. My voice calm. Even. Final. You don't fix it with timing. A pause. You fix it by not doing it. He didn't respond. Because there was no answer to that. No version of it that worked. The room stayed quiet. But not empty. Settled. Because everything had found its place. I opened the door. Stepped out. And closed it behind me. Gently. Because nothing needed force anymore. The hallway outside felt different. Not because it changed. Because I had. Because this wasn't confusion anymore. Or suspicion. Or reaction. It was resolution. My phone buzzed as I walked toward the exit. Lawson. I answered. It's in motion, I said. I know, he replied. No surprise. No question. Everything lines up. Of course it did. Because the truth doesn't need alignment. It already fits. What happens now? I asked. Now, he said. A pause. Now it runs. That was the part most people don't see. The part after. When everything is no longer in your hands. When it moves through a system designed to finish what was started. I stepped outside. The air felt lighter. Not because the situation was over. Because it was clear. And clarity is what changes everything. Behind me, inside that building, things were still moving. Files, records, processes, all connected, all structured, all leading somewhere he didn't expect. And for the first time since this began, I wasn't waiting for something to happen. I already knew it would. I didn't go home right away. Not after leaving the bank. Not after everything had finally been said and placed exactly where it belonged. Because going back too soon would make it feel like something needed to be finished. And it didn't. Not anymore. I sat in the car for a moment. Engine off. Hands still. Letting everything settle. Not replaying what happened. Not questioning it. Just understanding it. Because for the first time since this started, there was nothing unclear. When I finally drove back, the house looked the same. Same door. Same windows. Same quiet. Nothing about it suggested anything had changed. But I knew better. Because change doesn't always show itself on the outside. Sometimes, it sits underneath everything, waiting for you to see it clearly. I walked in, set my keys down. Same place. Same routine. But this time, it wasn't about habit. It was about closure. David was already there, sitting in the living room. Not moving. Not on his phone. Not distracted. Just sitting. That was the first difference. Because stillness like that doesn't come from control. It comes from realization. He looked up when I walked in. Didn't speak right away. Didn't try to explain. Because now, there was nothing left to explain. I didn't stop. Didn't sit across from him. Didn't recreate the moment from earlier. Because that moment was already over. Instead, I walked past him. Into the kitchen. Picked up the same glass from before. Still there. Still untouched. I took a sip this time. Not because I needed it. Because something had finally changed. Footsteps behind me. Slow. Measured. He stopped near the doorway. Not entering fully. Not staying away either. That distance said more than anything else. I didn't think it would get this far, he said. His voice was different now. Not controlled. Not calculated. Just real. I didn't respond immediately. Because what he said wasn't a surprise. It was the truth. The version he had been living in. Where timing fixes everything. Where staying ahead means staying safe. Where nothing catches up if you move fast enough. It always gets this far, I said. My voice calm. Even. Not harsh. Just certain. Because systems don't stop halfway. Truth doesn't stop halfway. He nodded slightly. Like he understood that now. Or was starting to. I was going to fix it, he said again. But this time, it didn't sound like an excuse. It sounded like something he was trying to understand himself. I turned. Looked at him. Fully. Because this was the last moment that mattered. Not what he did. Not what the system would decide. What he finally understood. You didn't think about what it meant, I said. A pause. You thought about what you could do. He didn't argue. Didn't correct. Because he knew. That was the difference. You used my name, I continued. Not repeating. Closing. And you thought it was just a name. Silence. Real silence. Not avoidance. Not tension. Just clarity. It's not, I said. Soft. But final. Not in the way you used it. He looked down. Then back up. Because now, he wasn't avoiding anything. He was facing it. I didn't know, he said. And for the first time, I believed him. Not about what he did. About what he didn't understand. You didn't, I agreed. Because that was the truth. He didn't understand the weight of it. The structure behind it. The system it moved through. The consequences attached to it. I set the glass down. Looked around the room. The same space. The same life. But something underneath it had changed completely. This isn't about the bank, I said. A pause. It's about what you thought you could take, another pause. Without asking. He didn't respond. Because there was nothing left to say against that. I walked past him again. Not avoiding. Not distancing. Just moving forward. Because that's what this was now. Forward. Not back. At the hallway, I stopped. Just for a second. Because there was one thing left to say. Not for him. For me. You didn't lose control today, I said. Without turning. You never had it. I let that settle. Because that was the truth he needed to carry. Not what happened. What it meant. Then I walked to my room. Closed the door. Gently. That night, the house was quiet again. But not the same quiet. Not uncertain. Not tense. Just still. My phone sat on the table beside me. Silent. Because everything that needed to move was already moving. Not here. Not in this house. Somewhere else. Through systems. Through processes. Through truth. I leaned back. Closed my eyes for a moment. Not tired. Not overwhelmed. Just finished. Because this wasn't about proving anything anymore. Or fixing anything. Or even understanding it. It was about seeing something clearly. Something most people miss. Until it's too late. Sometimes, people don't take things from you. They take chances. Chances built on what they think you won't question. What they think you won't see. What they think won't come back to them. But it always does. Not loudly. Not immediately. But completely. And once it does, there's nothing left to fix. Only something left to understand. And this time that was enough.